We are in week 2 of our series on miracles. And if you were not here, by the way, last week, I would highly encourage you to go back and to listen to last week's message, because it kind of sets the table for everything we're going to be talking about over the next couple of months. Thank you, Sir Ryan. Appreciate you very much. I'm going to start things off, though. And where is Ellie here? Where's Ellie? Smiling over there. And all right, this is not a true story. I got to give you guys heads up, because you guys are all, is that a true story? Is that not? So now I feel like I got to tell you straight up, not a true story. All right, this is definitely not a true story. You'll know by the opening line. So, a priest, a bishop, and the Pope are enjoying a leisurely day of fishing on a lake in the boat, and they're having a great time when the bishop stands up and stretches, rocking the boat a little bit, and says, "You know what? I'm parched. I think I'm going to go to shore, and I'm going to get something to drink out of the cooler on shore." So he steps out of the boat, walks on the water all the way to the cooler to get himself a drink, and the Pope is just sitting there like amazed, just thinking, "Whoa, how blessed is he that this bishop just walked on water?" And then the priest stands up and says, "You know what? I think I'm going to grab a sandwich from the cooler." And so the priest then gets out of the boat and walks over to the cooler on the water, and he says, "Your Holiness, would you like something while I'm out?" And then the Pope is just sitting there, just too stunned to even make sense of it or say any words, and he just kind of waves him on, unable to talk at the sight of now a priest walking on the lake's surface. Well, a few minutes go by before the Pope comes to a realization. Wait, I'm the most devout and steadfast of them all. If the Lord's going to give the ability to a lowly priest to walk on water, well, then I can walk on water too. And so he stands up, and the Pope summons all of his faith and then steps over the edge of the boat and just goes crashing into the water below. And his two fishing partners run over, and they grab him and pull him out of the water. The priest says to the bishop, "Do you think maybe we should have told him about the stepping stones?" Yeah. We are, like I said, in week 2 of our series, Miracles, Fingerprints of an Awesome God. And last week, we simply posed the question, right? If you were listening, what is a miracle? And we looked at some different definitions, and we explored things that at first glance might seem miraculous, but they're not miraculous at all because they don't meet the criteria. And then we looked at some categories of miracles and why God does certain kinds of miracles. So if you weren't here, like I said, go back and listen. And then we announced kind of what we're going to do is we're going to journey through the Bible on this one, right? We're going to start with the Old Testament, because in the Old Testament, God does some awesome things, and he shows up in Genesis and then Exodus and Leviticus, and he puts on these powerful displays for his people. And then after a while, his prophets get involved, and they're doing all kinds of miracles. And then Jesus shows up on the scene, and for 3 years, right, he is a walking, talking miracle for 3 years. Every day he goes into town, and he's healing people and raising people back to life and doing all kinds of weird things. And then he dies and then comes back to life and goes to heaven. And when he goes away, the miracles do not go away, because now it's his disciples doing all of those things. And we're gonna look at some of those miracles too. But we want to do this. We want to ask and study and look at all that so that we can ask this very important question: do miracles still happen today? Do miracles still happen today? Will you bow your heads and pray with me? Father, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. It doesn't actually take very long when you read the Old Testament to begin to see the mighty acts of God. The opening scene, right, is that of creation and mountains being formed, and the sun and the moon and the stars being placed in the universe, fish and animals. And then, of course, the masterpiece, you and I are created, and we're the final product of creation. But to me, the most compelling aspect of the creation story is found, it's a Latin phrase that's used in theological circles that says when God created the world, he created it ex nihilo, which means out of nothing. This is a big deal, that when God made the world and spoke us and everything into existence, He didn't use it just by like taking existing matter and like evolving it or just reshaping it. No. He created matter. That is the God of the universe. That is the God of the Bible. That is the God that died. Miraculous God. And creation is our entry point, into the fingerprints he leaves behind. Right? That's why Paul says in Romans 1:20, since the creation of the world, God's divine qualities, his nature, his characteristics have been clearly seen so that there's no human on the planet without excuse. They just got to go outside and they can see the fingerprints of God and bow down and worship. And so as we move through Genesis, we begin to see God leaving fingerprints all over the place. In Genesis 3, God places a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard people from getting access to the tree of life. He's leaving fingerprints. In Genesis 6, God leaves his fingerprints in a big way in the form of a worldwide flood showing his dominance over nature. In Genesis 11, he leaves his fingerprints again, confusing the language of mankind as they had attempted to build this monstrous tower and make a name for themselves. We have the story of the Tower of Babel. In Genesis 19, we have more fingerprints as God performs the miracle of judgment on the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And in Genesis 21, we see the fingerprints of God again as Sarah's almost 100 years old and she finds herself pregnant. And by the way, this miracle would be the beginning of the fulfilling of God's promise to Abraham. A miracle was the vehicle for the start of the covenant. That's not a small deal. In Genesis 32, we have the greatest WWE match of all time, right? And it's not Hulk Hogan. It's not Stone Cold Steve Austin. It's not Cody Rhodes. It's none of those people. Jacob finds himself in a wrestling match with God, and God drops him on this move, and it's not the Cody Cutter, it's not the Stone Cold Stunner, it's none of those things, it's not the Rhea Riptide. No, he drops him and then permanently leaves a reminder on his hip, more fingerprints. And then in Genesis 4, of bad luck, which you and I know it's actually not bad luck, it's the providence of God. Joseph is given the ability to interpret dreams, and he goes from rags to riches. Yet again, the fingerprints of God. But then something happens. 430 years of silence. 430 years go by. No fingerprints. God is silent. The Hebrews are slaves in Egypt, and they're crying out to God. And when they need God the most, when they really need God to step up and bail them out and do something for them, where is God? And it feels like he's ghosting them. Have you ever felt like that before, by the way? Like God was ghosting you? This will probably make some of you paranoid, right? Especially if you're like in a new relationship, right? Maybe you've been like talking with, that's the terminology these days, by the way. They're talking, right? So I remember having a conversation with Soleil a while ago, and I was like, who are you talking to these days, right? And she's like, what do you mean? I said, well, I know you're talking to a number of people, right? And she's like, no, that's awful, Papa. You don't talk to a lot of people. I said, what do you mean? Well, that's the terminology for like dating. So if a young person says, I'm talking to somebody, they are in a committed relationship with the person. That's messed up. All right? So if you're talking to someone, all right, this might make you a little bit paranoid, especially if the relationship's a little bit young, but I'm going to share with you a top 10 list that I came up with, the top 10 signs you are being ghosted. Yeah, and some of you, like, if you're in a new, I'm telling you, this is time to put. On the top 10 signs you are being ghosted is this: the person refuses to make plans. Right? So you're all about, hey, we should do this, and I think we should do this, and the person's like, all right, whatever. But they never ever, it's a good sign you're being ghosted. Number 9, the person is MIA when it comes to sharing personal details. So you're sharing all kinds of things about your life and your past and your likes, and they don't share anything significant back. There's a good sign that you're being ghosted. Number 8, the person bails on you for other plans, right? So they got plans with you, but something else comes up bigger, something else comes up better, and they drop those plans with you to do something else. It's a good sign you're being ghosted. Number 7 on the top 10 signs you're being ghosted list, they act distant when in person. So, when you're talking virtually, they're texting paragraphs, they're going back and forth, but as soon as you're in public, they're staying away from you and almost avoiding you, and you're left, what's going on here? Well, there's a good sign you're being ghosted. Number 6, they give constant excuses for everything, right? So every time a plan has to change or they can't do something, there's always an excuse. Number 5, on the top 10 signs you're being ghosted list, they go silent when you mention the future, right? So hey, you know what? Wow, could you imagine us being this or doing this? Could you imagine how awesome it would be to have this together? And they just don't say anything back. It's a good sign you're being ghosted. Here's one, number 4, they use non-committal language. So that you're willing to nail down something concrete, and they're never willing to commit to anything. They're always like, that sound good to do someday. Oh yeah, man, maybe one day we could do that together. But they're non-committal in their language. Number 3, they're super conversational early on, but not anymore, right? So the relationship fires up, and they're texting and FaceTiming all the time, and you're going back and forth and having all these great conversations early on, but after a while, it just kind of dissipates, and it's every once in a while. It's a good sign that you are being ghosted. Number 2, on the top 10 signs you're being ghosted list, a one-word text, right? So you fire off a paragraph, and they're like, good. Or you ask and share a bunch of things, and they're like, fine. And you get those one word, it's a good sign you're being ghosted. And the number 1 sign that you are being ghosted is this: they take forever to message back. They take forever to message back. Have you ever felt like God was taking forever to message back? I talk to people all the time, and that's how they feel about God. Like maybe when they first started following Jesus, they can remember back then they felt super close to Him and God was revealing things to them. But as time wore on, they grow distant, or they're facing, name that problem, and they've asked God to help and to make it better, to make the problem go away, but it's still there. And so they draw the conclusion that God doesn't care, or God's not listening, or God is mad at them, or maybe God is, for some reason they don't know, ghosting them. And at the risk of throwing a trivial answer at a complex question, by the way, we discussed this at Garage Time a couple weeks ago with the men in the church. Sometimes when we talk to God and put requests, sometimes God says yes. Sometimes God says no. And sometimes God says not yet. And by the way, the yes we love, right? Like when we go to God, we're like, hey, God, it'd be really good if you could do this for me right now. And then it happens like that day or that moment. We're like, oh, God, you are an awesome God. I'll sing that song all day. As parents, we see this with our kids, right? They come up to us like, hey, could I have Rachel come over for a sleepover tonight? And your parents are like, yeah. And they're like, oh, Mom, you're awesome. We're the greatest mom ever, right? And they super love it when you give the yes answer right away. And then there's no. No, we're not happy when we get that answer, but at least it's final. At least we know what the answer is, right? So there's a little bit of peace with the no, right? And so we see that with our kids as parents. Like, hey, could we this weekend go and do X thing at X place? And your parents are like, no, we're not doing it. And they're like, oh, there's no, oh, can I give a hug? That was a great answer, Mom. The way you said no was amazing and made me feel so loved. We don't get that, right? We accept the no because it's final. And even with God, we're okay with the no because, it's clear, it's concrete. We got it. We can move on and go a different direction. In Acts chapter 16, the Apostle Paul gets no. He wants to go to Asia. He wants to go to Bithynia. And God says, no, you're not going there. even though that's what he wanted to do. And so he's like, oh, okay, we'll go in a different direction. When God says no, what do? We go in a different direction. So yes, we love. No, we're not a big fan of, but we can deal, because at least we know it's the not yet that drives us crazy. It's the not yet that leaves us up at night. And as parents with our kids, right, that drives them. My kids, that's what drives them. They'll come up to me like, hey, can I get some money? I want to buy this thing. It's awesome, and I really want it. And I'm like, you know what? Let me pray about it. And they're like, oh. They hate for a while, and then they keep coming back, and have you just, like, not yet drives them crazy. Imagine how the Hebrew people felt. 430 years, and it's silent. 430 years of not yet. I mean, they'd heard about the promise God made to Abraham and then confirmed to Isaac and Jacob that God would make them great. Kind of hard to feel great when you're living as a slave and you don't have any freedom and you can't see a way out, and the only one who can provide that way out doesn't seem to be listening to you. No fingerprints that we know of for a long time. But God is about to change all of that, and it's about to be game on, Donkey Kong. It's going to be a fingerprint bonanza. In Exodus 2, right? Moses is born. And with that, we have a little bit of a problem. Because the fertile part of the promise to Abraham was happening, right? So God said in Genesis 12, I'm going to make your name great. I'm going to bless you. The whole world is going to be blessed by you. Your descendants will be as numerous as the stars in the sky, right? Well, these Hebrew women are fertile, and they're popping out babies like mad, like crazy. And so that's happening. And then Pharaoh wakes up one day, and he looks around. He's like, we got a problem here. He talks to his officials, and he's like, if we don't do something, they're outnumbering us. They could take over the land. And so he does a couple things. One is oppose slavery, and the other is genocide. And he pulls the Hebrew midwives into his palace office, and they sit down, and he says, hey, you're doing a great job, but I have a proposition for you. Not a proposition, more of a command. So here's what I want you to do. When you walk into a home and there's a Hebrew woman and she's in labor and delivering, and that baby comes out, I want you to take that baby, and if it's a girl, just smile and clean that baby out and then hand that baby to mom, and you can have a little party. It's going to be great. But if that baby is male, you're to drown that baby. And of course, the Hebrew midwives, they leave the presence of Pharaoh. They go back and they ignore Pharaoh's command out of their respect for God and life. And so when they don't obey his command, Pharaoh takes it up a notch, and he makes a countrywide proclamation that every male born needs to be thrown into the Nile. So Miriam has a baby named Moses, and she's faced with the ultimate problem. What do I do with my son? If I keep my son, he dies. And so she makes the sacrifice to take her baby, put her baby in a basket, and put him in the Nile, right? Put him in the river. So that's what Miriam does, and says goodbye to her baby, not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing will God take care of this baby, and then sends her daughter, Moses' sister, to follow the basket, right? And by the way, this story for me is a very personal story because of my kids. I've got 4 adopted from China. Mac, Lily, Thad, and Luna are all adopted from China. And the thing about adopting a baby from China is we knew, we adopted medically ill kids that had very significant medical issues. And the reality is this: if you're poor in China and you give birth to a child that has significant medical issues, right, you can't afford the procedures for them. If you keep that child, if you keep as a parent that child, they die. So when Lily comes to me, or Mac comes to me, or Thad comes to me, and they're little and they're asking, why would my Why would my mommy, why would my dad, why would they give me up? I get the point to Exodus and the story of Moses. Your parents loved you desperately. Your parents made the ultimate sacrifice. They let go of you so that you could live. That's a beautiful story. So I love this story so much. It's so personal to me. And so Moses' mom puts Moses in the basket and sends the basket off. And of course, Pharaoh's daughter, the story, comes along and sees this basket, and there's a baby in the basket. It's a Hebrew baby. And so she takes this baby and she runs to Dad. She's like, Daddy, can I have a Hebrew, please? Right? And of course, the spoiled brat, Dad's like, yeah, because she throws a fit. Oh, I really want Hebrew. And so he's like, okay, fine, keep the baby, right? And then but she needs someone to take care of the baby. So the cool thing is, because Moses' sister had followed the basket, she's like, hey, I will go find someone to come nurse the baby. And she goes and gets Moses' mom. What? So Moses gets to grow up in the castle with Pharaoh, being raised with all the amenities and the lifestyles that come along with that. That's good stuff. And has his mom still in his life. That's the ultimate win right there. And everything's going great in Mo's world. He grows up until one day he's traveling through the area in Egypt where the Hebrews are at work and they're slaves. So there's taskmasters. And he sees something he's never seen before. Now, it's commonplace. It happens every day. It happens all the time. He's just never seen it before. And he sees an Egyptian taskmaster beating on a Hebrew slave. And he's so tilted in his spirit by this that he rushes at the Egyptian and he strikes him down and kills him in cold blood. And then, thinking, I just rescued my people. It feels pretty good. Everything's going great at that point, and he walks away. And the next day, he's like, you know what? I'm going to go maybe meet some of these homies of mine. And so he's literally traveling through the same area, and he sees the next day two Hebrews, and they're in fisticuffs. They're going at it back and forth, and they're haymakers and slugging. And he gets him in the middle, and he's like, whoa, what are you guys doing? You have the Egyptians doing this to you. Why do you need to destroy each other like this? And then one of the Hebrews says back to him, are you gonna kill us too, like you did to the Egyptian? And then Moses hears that and he's like, oh no. They know. Word has gotten out, and he freaks out and he panics and he flees Egypt into the wilderness. Happens to bump into a guy named Jethro. Jethro has a pretty good-looking little lady, a daughter, and Moses takes a liking to her. They get married. They start having a family, and they've got a couple boys. And so what happens in the story is he flees Egypt, and he goes out to the wilderness, is Moses on his life. Moses literally turns the page. He had his old life, he had his old family, he had his old buddies, Moses turns the page in his life. God has not. Back in Egypt, right? So back in Egypt, all this is going on, and Moses got this new situation that he's living and loving. So back in Egypt, the Pharaoh that was on the throne when Moses did the whole murder thing is now dead. And so keep in mind, by the way, kind of like Rome was 2,000 years ago, and the United States was for 100 years, and Canada is now. Egypt was the top power in the world at the time. And don't laugh at that. That hurt. So that Pharaoh's dead. There's a new Pharaoh, and that new king, by the way, is making things even worse for the Hebrews. This is what the text says. Exodus 2 says this, verse 23. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, with Jacob. And so God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. Not yet had just become right now. Not yet had just, and as for fingerprints, God was about to leave some. If you have your Bibles, open them up to Exodus chapter 3. We're going to read 5 verses here. Here we go, verse 1. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. This area plays a very important and significant role in Hebrews and in the Israelites' history. There, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that even though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. And so Moses thought, weird. I'm going to go over and see this strange sight, why this bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that Moses had gone over to look, God called out to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your flip-flops, for the place where you are standing, for the place you are standing is holy ground. Now that's a good story, right? May God bless the reading of his word. Moses is hanging out near Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. And he's out in the wilderness. He's got the animals there with him. And he looks off into the distance and he sees a bush that's on fire, which that happens. Like, that's not that odd of a sight. What is odd is even though the bush is on fire, it is not being consumed. It is still burning and burning, burning at the same rate, and nothing is getting burned up, right? And so intrigued, Moses walks over to the bush to see what odd thing is happening here. And when he does approach the bush, God speaks to him, and which, Moses freaks out. Miracles can do that. And God says to Moses, listen, if you read on in the text, I've seen what the Hebrews are going through, and I've heard their cries for help, and I'm going to rescue them from Egypt and bring them out to this beautiful land that's prepared for them. And then he turns to Moses and says, and you're the guy that's going to do it. Moses, you're the guy. And Moses says, I am not the guy. And God says, but you are the guy. And Moses is like, well, who are you? And he's like, I am who I am. And Moses is like, that's weird. And that's what I tell Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's just going to be like, have all these people. And Moses freaks out, and God says, don't worry about it. There's going to be these plagues, and I'm going to display my power, and you're going to get to do all these cool things. And then Pharaoh will let so God tells Moses the whole plan, and Moses is still like, well, what if they don't believe me, right? And so God says, okay, in chapter 4, fine, as if the burning bush thing wasn't enough for you, take your staff, Moses, right, and just throw it to the ground, right? And so he takes his staff and he throws it on the ground, and it becomes a snake, right? And Moses screams, ah! And then God says, now, Moses, pick up the snake. And Moses is like, ah! But he does obey God, and it becomes a staff again, right? And then, so Moses is like, that's fine, but I don't think Pharaoh's going to get rid of all of his forced labor just because I can turn a staff into a snake. And God says, well, then take your hand, Moses, and put it inside your robe. And he does. And says, now pull it out, Moses. And when he looks at his hand, Moses goes, ah! And his hand is white because it's leprous, right? And God says, don't freak, put it back in the robe. And he does. And when he takes it out, it's clean again. And the message is this, Moses, I will be with you. The 430 years of silence are over. God activity is surging, and we're seeing miracles happen all over the place, starting with the burning bush. And I love this story. I love what God does here. Moses had flipped a switch, right? He had turned his back on his Egyptian family. They were the ones that raised him. He turned his back on his Hebrew family. They were the ones that needed him. But think about how hard that had to be for Moses. Right? Those were the people he played football with all day when he was a little kid. The ones he hung out with in the evenings, the friends that got in trouble with him, the family that had movie nights together, whatever it was. Like, that was his whole life. It's all he'd ever known. Think about how hard it had to be to walk away from the people that raised him and from the people that brought him into this world, to shut down those memories, to say, I can't think about that. I can't think about them. I've got to find a way to just focus. Think about how hard that had to be to just embrace his new normal, but he did it. At that point in Moses' life, it was going to take nothing short of a miracle to get Moses' attention. And so, a miracle is what God does. In defying the laws of nature, he sets a bush on fire, and it just burns and burns, and it's not being consumed. So, that's not normal. I did campfires growing up at Canoe Cove Christian Camp, and so when we were at camp, we'd go there for a week, and in the whole group of students would be divided into groups, and every day, every group had a chore they had to do. And one day it was bathroom cleaning, another day was meal prep, another day was dish duty. But one group every day got to make the bonfire for that night's campfire. I loved when our group got to make the bonfire. Because, man, my friends and I would get as many sticks as we could, and we would pile that thing as high as we could. We'd be jumping up and putting sticks in there because we wanted to see how long it could burn. And they would light it at night, and the thing would go up, and we're hoping it can be seen from space. That was always the goal. But guess what happened every night? By the end of the night, ashes. Like, that's all that was left, not this bush in the wilderness. And so Moses sees it, and he's intrigued by it, and the rest is history. And so I would put forth that, like he did for Moses, sometimes God uses a miracle to get our attention. Like he did for Moses, sometimes God will use a miracle to get your attention because we're focused on the wrong thing or pursuing the wrong thing, and we can become so laser focused like Moses did on what we want to do and our accomplishments and the world that we've built for ourselves, and so fixated on that the only way to break through it for God is the action of God in our lives. And so he leaves his fingerprints. It worked for, by the way, Saul on the road to Damascus when God needed to get his attention, right? And he blinded him. It worked for Nebuchadnezzar when God basically made him a cow to get his attention. Sometimes God will use a miracle to get our attention. He'll use a miracle to sometimes wake us up. And when you look at Moses, I want you to think about the scars that dude carried. I mean, he was running from his past. He'd murdered someone. He didn't feel safe among his own people or the people that raised him. His past was a mess. It was a mess. But God saw something in Moses did not see and could not see in himself. God saw something inside of that man could not see when he looked in a mirror. And there's some of you in this room that you can relate to that. Now, maybe you're not fully running from your past, but maybe there are parts of it that you don't like, things that you've hidden, things you've said or done you're not proud of. And maybe like Moses, you think it disqualifies you. Like because of what you did and who you were, God could never use you, not after what you've done. And maybe you're here because you're here in church because you hope he forgives you. But you don't forgive you. And even if God does forgive you, use you, that's a totally different thing. To do great things, what? Me? No. That's what I love about the burning bush, to be honest. It shows how far God will go to get your attention. It shows how far God will go to get your attention, to show you who you are to him and who you can be for him and what you can do for him. And some of you need to feel that and know that right now. That God loves you and chose you and wants to use you no matter what you've done in the past. Meg and Aaron, I don't know if this story is true or not. A little boy named Tom, I love the story though, he had made, and it took him a couple months to do it, he made this beautiful little boat with all of his free time. And so he one day, it was the day, he was gonna see if this boat floats. And so he took it down to the river, a boat he made with his own hands. And he carefully placed this boat on the water and then let it out into the water with a string that he kept so it was always attached and he could pull it in if need be. And he just looked and admired how smoothly that boat sailed on top of the water. And he sat in the warm sunshine admiring the boat that I built. But then suddenly the winds got a little bit stronger and a current got hold of the boat and the boat began to go downstream. And so the little boy Tom grabbed the string to pull the boat in, but the string snapped and the boat raced downstream. So little Tom got up and he ran along the shore as fast as his little legs could carry him. But it didn't take long before the boat slipped out of sight over the horizon. All afternoon long, Tom walked along the edge of the water looking for his boat. And finally, when it was too dark to look anymore, he walked back home, tears in his eyes, walked in the front door. His mom said, "What's wrong?" He said, "I lost my boat." And he was sad. But a few days later, on the way home from school, Tom happened to be walking past a secondhand store, and he looked inside the window, and he saw something he thought he recognized. And he looked a little closer. I think that's my boat. And he ran into the store and he got a close look, and sure enough, it was his boat. And he raced up to the store owner behind the counter. And he said, sir, that's my boat in your window. I made it. It's my boat. Can I have my boat? Please, can I have my boat? And the store owner said to Tom, I am sorry, but I paid for that boat. But Tom said, you don't get it. I made it. I have the plans. I can show you. I can take you over to the boat, and I'll show you where all the markings I made on that boat are. It's my boat. Please. And the store owner said, I'm sorry. But because I paid for it, if you want that boat, you're going to have to pay the full price for that boat. And so when he told him the price, Tom ran out of the store and he raced home as fast as he could, and he grabbed his piggy bank and he got all of his money and he hurried back to the store. And when he arrived back to the store, he ran up to the owner and said to the store, here's all the money, with excitement in his voice, smiling from ear to ear. He gave the full money, all of his money, the exact price for the boat, and the owner gave the boat to Tom. And he walked out holding that boat. And as he walked out, smiling from ear to ear, hugging on his treasured possession, the store owner heard Tom talking to his boat and saying, "You are my boat. You are twice my boat. First, you're my boat because I made you. And now you're my boat because I bought you." And so I will say this. If you have somehow convinced yourself that you are not worth that much at all, and if you think you're cheap, and if you think you don't have value, just remember what God thinks about you. You are His. Twice His. First, because He made you. And secondly, because He bought you. At the cross of Calvary, He paid the price to buy you back, the full price to redeem you. You think the burning bush was impressive? How about the death and then resurrection? The distance, the length He went to get our soul's attention, to show you He's not done with you. No matter your past, no matter the amount of sin or the kind of sin that you've racked up, no matter how lowly you think of yourself, He was not done with Moses. When He called out His name, He is not done with you. And maybe, just maybe, He's calling out your name. So what's it going to take for you to respond the way Moses did? Here I am, Lord. Are you ready to become God's messenger? How do you respond when God does something to get your attention? Will you stand and pray with me? Father in heaven, oh my God, you are awesome. Oh my God, you are good. Thank you for not leaving me drowning in my own sin and mess, but for stepping into it to pull me out of it and make me your own. So here I am, yours because I am bought by the blood. Father, if there's no one here, if there's someone here that has never made that decision to surrender their life to you, and you're calling them this morning and you're pleading with them, hey, here I am. Father, I pray that that's the response to you. Here I am, Lord. I am all yours. For those who feel like their past has rendered them useless to you, Father, I thank you that you are not done with them yet. You have great things in store for them, filled by your power and your Spirit. Father, they can do great things through you and because of you, because you are in them and move through them. Here I am, Lord. Here I am, Lord. And I worship you.